Hi class, Professor Brennan here again. This is for my argumentation class. We're in part 2 of categories and types of evidence. We had left off talking about, I believe we were talking about testimony. That's right, we discussed testimony and now we're going to move into statistics. Let's pull the PowerPoint up here. Okay, we talked about testimony. So when we talk about statistics, we love statistics, right? What are statistics? Numbers, percentages, the amount of something, how many people. One of the first things you have to ask is who are they asking? Like when they say statistics, 53% of males now have long hair. What 53%? Where did you get that? Where did you get that number? And 53% of how many people did you ask? Who did you ask? What is the age group? Were they straight or not straight? Were they transgender? Were they black? Were they white? Were they Asian? Like, we need details. We need the demographic details. So when statistics are collected, we want to know, who did you collect them from? How were they collected? That's the first question. How were they collected? Did you call them up? Did you send something in the mail? How did you collect that data? How is the data represented? Is it a raw number, meaning I believe that means a real number, or is it a percentage? And what time frame was it collected? Was it collected over a 3-month period? Was it collected within the last 5 years? And when you look at the percentage, we have to always know percentages. We have to know in terms of, what are we looking at? The percentage of 500,000 people? Or are we looking at the percentage of, 50,000 people? We need to know that, right? When we say Americans, they love to say these kinds of things when we have presidential elections. 53% are going to vote for Joe Biden, or 51% are for Donald Trump, and 49% are for President Biden. Well, did they call every single American in the United States? How do they get that information? How did they figure that out? This is something you have to ask yourself. Where are they getting this information? Who are they talking to? Are they just talking about the state of Maryland, or are they talking about like the whole Western U.S., right? What are they talking about? All those things you need to ask yourself. Let's go back to that for a second because I want you to think this way. When we get into debate, this lecture is going to be highly helpful to you. Why? Because these are the kinds of things that you want to ask your opposition. You want to ask, if you're on the negative, you want to ask affirmative thing. Well, this percentages, this data that was collected, where was it from? Why? Why do you ask these questions? Because it pokes holes in their argument. Most people don't take the time to figure that out. So these are the kinds of things you as a researcher, you want to do, but these are also tools for you and strategies for you to use when you get into debate. Keep all of this in mind. You can ask about statistics. You can ask about testimony. You can ask, is there a sufficient number of examples? Because one example does not lead to a conclusion. One example does not lead to a conclusion. The way there has to be a pattern of examples, right? The same what I talked about. There has to be a pattern of these things happening, of these events, to show that there is something, it needs a solution. It can't be like a one-time event, doesn't equal anything. Okay, I think you're getting my drift. Okay, objects and artifacts, also types of evidence. When people use objects or artifacts to back up their claim, as evidence of their claim, you have to ask about the legitimacy of it. You have to ask, is that the way it's, here's a perfect example. There's a lot of documentaries and a lot of documentaries on Netflix if you've ever checked it out before. I have this interest in aliens. And so there's a lot of documentaries that are really far out there that they just made it up. It's completely rigged or distorted. Okay. But because We live in a culture that doesn't really believe in that. It's hard to know it's hard to know whether it's scientifically proven, like it's really real or not real. Those are the kinds of things when they use things like that to ask yourself. Now, what you don't ask yourself is, did we land on the moon? Okay, people that are trying to say that someone made that story up and it's a Hollywood thing. No, I can tell you right now, when they made that up, the way that they did film in those days, they weren't even capable of that kind of film making anyway. So they didn't make that up. So, but those are the things you have to ask yourself. Is it rigged or distorted? Standards, developing your own standards for good evidence. Looking at, is the evidence even relevant to the claim? Is there a relationship between the claim and the evidence? There has to be a relationship. If there's no relationship between the claim and the evidence, it's not relevant. Specificity, say that really fast 10 times. Specificity. Specificity. Is the evidence too vague? Evidence should be specific to whatever claim you're making. It should be relevant, should be related, it should be particular, specific. It cannot be vague. If you're going to say that there's a percentage evidence, it has to be specific percent, not a round number, not about 300 people, because that sounds vague. It sounds like you really don't even know what you're talking about. Objectivity. Is the source unbiased? I talked about that app that you could put on your phone that I actually want all of you to have. It's called the All Sides app. And I'm actually going to show it to you right here on film so that, or on this video, so you see it. So here's an example of the All Sides app. I'm showing it to you right now. It's there on the screen. Okay, it's called an app, All Sides. It has that little, I don't know if you can totally see the little logo right there called All Sides. And basically it presents news articles, different news articles, and then it defines whether it's right-leaning, left-leaning, in the middle, centrist. And this has to do with point of view and has to do with bias. So when you ask, is your source unbiased? Or you could ask, because I'm telling you, most things are biased. You could ask, what bias do they have? And the way that you can create an unbiased, complete unbiased point of view is by looking at both sources and a middle source and drawing a conclusion of what, because there's some truth in both sides. Whether it's left or right, there's truth in there. They're not generally speaking, they're not usually pulling from, they might be distorting the evidence, they might be distorting it, but there's some truth in there. Okay. Reliability. Has the source been correct? That should say many times. I don't know where the times went on there many times. Sorry about that. I have no idea. Let's see if it's going to pick up there. I have no idea why that's separated there. But has the source been correct many times in the past? You have to ask yourself, has it? Is it reliable? Does it have credibility? Does the newspaper have credibility? Do people believe it when the New York Times has a lot of credibility? It is a left-leaning paper, but it has a lot of credibility. People believe it. Access. Does the source have first-hand knowledge of the issue? This also is observational capacity. We talked about that already. Expertise. Does the source have a wide background or knowledge? Do they know a lot about this topic, right? Are they an expert in that area? You could assume one of the ways that we know that national newspapers like the New York Times, like the Los Angeles Times, like the Sacramento Bee, like the Wall Street Journal, they are credible sources of news. Why? Because they employ people that are educated. they employ people that have at least a minimum of a bachelor's degree in journalism and or some kind of writing. And they have, by the time no one walks in with their bachelor's degree in the New York Times, generally speaking, they have to prove themselves as a reporter. They have to get experience and have expertise probably in an area before they even get hired as a regular reporter for any of those newspapers. Recency, timeliness is the evidence from the most appropriate time period. If you're trying to make an argument about changes that need to be made right now, then you need to get the most appropriate information that's happening right now. You need statistics from right now, meaning not right now is like a period of in the last year, or in the last couple of years, right? If you say that this has been happening, but if you're trying to establish it's been happening for a long term, then you want to have a wider range of what you're looking at. It depends on what you're arguing. But if you're trying to argue for something that needs to change right now, it's been an issue right now, you can't bring me data from 5 years ago. It's not going to fly. And if you're in the debate, these are the things that you kind of want to know. Why is someone pulling from in 2007 and giving a percentage? That's just lazy research. But you as a debater have to pay attention to that. Not to say that they're lazy, but to ask them why are they reporting that particular statistics from that particular time. External consistency. Is the evidence consistent with other available evidence? So do enough people say this is what's happening? Is there enough percentage? Or are they all agreeing? Okay, let's look at the election. There was this accusation of election fraud. It seems that enough states were in agreement that there was no election fraud, and they had been saying it over and over again. That's external consistency. That has nothing to do with politics or who's supposed to win. Consistency, right. Okay. We're coming toward the end now. Last one. Standards for good evidence. Internal consistency. Is the evidence consistent with itself? Does it make sense? Does the claim or the evidence, does it not contradict itself? Right? Things you want to ask. Is it sometimes in articles, a reporter can write something, and I'm telling you, somewhere it's contradicted itself. They say one thing and then they say another, which right there makes you think you just like wrote that article and you didn't reread it. The editor didn't read it. Are you purposely trying to do that? That article then gets called into question. And cumulativeness. Does all the evidence add up to support the claim or conclusion? So when you've come up with your debate and your argument, does it all add up? All the stuff that you've gathered, does it all point to the argument you're trying to make? Do they all back up each other? Do they all support each other? You don't want to have, so internal consistency could also be in your full argument of all the research you do. Okay, does it all add up to come to the same claim or same conclusion? So this is, might seem like what an order, but I can tell you these are the things. In order to do good research, these are the things that you want to keep in mind when you get there. All right, that's it for me. I'm going to stop here and I will see you all later. You have a beautiful day.